Well, thank you all for coming today. Welcome you to the second in our Student Scholars presentations this year. Before I introduce this year's second presenter, Zach Navett, let me introduce the respondents to his presentation, Emily Newman of Sidley Austin LP and our own Professor Bob Destro. Emily is a graduate of our law school, currently with Sidley Austin's Government Strategies practice. Her practice focuses primarily on health, food, and drug law and policy, as well as financial services, cybersecurity, and congressional investigation spaces. Over the past 2 months, she has spent a great deal of time co-authoring an amicus briefs for the First Amendment Lawyers Association, which is just filed in the United States Supreme Court. We thank her for coming back to CUA and joining us for the presentation today. As you all know, Professor Destro has been a member of the faculty since 1982 and served as interim dean from 1999 to 2001. From 1983 to 1989, Professor Destro served as a commissioner on the United States Commission on Civil Rights and led the commission's discussion in the areas of discrimination on the basis of disability, national origin, and religion. He is the founding director of the Interdisciplinary Program in Law and Religion here at the Catholic University of America. We also thank him for participating in today's program. Now let me introduce our presenter, Zach Navett. Zach received his BA in philosophy, MD in systematic theology, and MA in pastoral theology from St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Wynwood, Pennsylvania. Since entering law school here at CUA, he has worked as a consultant for Typecraft Press, served as a research intern in the First Amendment Center of the Museum Institute, and served as a summer law intern in the chambers of the Honorable Pamela Pryor Denby, Court of Common Pleas, Philadelphia. He has also co-authored a work for the First Amendment Center on the constitutionality of funeral picketing laws since Snyder versus Phelps. Zach's article, which was nominated by the Catholic University Law Review for the Student Scholar Series this year, stems from his work in both the fields of education and business and from his personal interaction with some of the legislators involved in creating and expanding the legislation that is the subject of his scholarship. I'll now turn the floor over to Zach Navett, the second of this year's Student Scholars. The title of his presentation, Pennsylvania's Educational Improvement Tax Credit and Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Programs, Businesses and Students Slip Through a Crack in the School Choice Wall of Separation. Zach.
Thank you, Professor Harmon, not only for everything here today, but through your guidance through this whole process. I just want to thank all of you for being here today, my classmates, my colleagues from the Law Review. Special thanks to Professor Destro for serving as my expert reader for this paper, and also to Emily Newman for being here. What brings me here today and what brought me to the point of my paper is really a great concern and love that I have for our kids, the kids of Pennsylvania specifically, but also on the whole, and their education and the opportunities that we provide for that education in the best way possible. So a desire to best serve our kids and provide for their education and future, and to give them the most opportunities available. Also, at the same time, I recognize that this issue of school choice, which I support and believe in, is not necessarily always understood or believed by everyone. So it is a controversial issue, then it does have opponents, those who would oppose efforts to give funding to education outside of our typical public school system. I think that Pennsylvania's law has provided an opportunity to navigate through many of the issues that opponents often raise and to provide an opportunity for serving, again, the interests of our kids and providing for their education in the best way possible. And so today I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the children who benefit from these programs and children who, many more children who could, not only in Pennsylvania but in other places, using Pennsylvania as a model, to present this legislation, to see how it was developed and why, and again, to offer it as a model for educational choice and opportunities in other places. I think we'll see that Pennsylvania's program of tax credits is appealing for a number of reasons. It avoids many constitutional and legal challenges. It is popular in and of itself for those involved. It offers a third way or an alternative for proponents of school choice itself. It gives greater freedom, and it also is a self-reinforcing program. And I hope as we go through this program today to develop and to talk about some of those areas. I guess just a minute to talk about what is school choice and what brings me to my belief that this is something that is beneficial to our kids, and it is just that. School choice is an arrangement that gives parents the opportunity to make the choice of what is best for their children and their education. In giving parents that choice, it also has other byproducts in that it creates a healthy competition among schools who have to put their best foot forward in offering programs. Also, in its ideal form, I would say that it does allow parents in choosing the schools also to have access to the funds that will make those schools available and affordable for their children. The modern debate about school choice comes from a book written by Milton Friedman in 1962, Capitalism and Freedom. And there he proposed school choice as a radical and progressive agenda that would benefit our society, our parents, and our children by adding efficiency to school systems and also giving fair treatment to private school users, allowing parents to choose among options. What are the options that typically exist? Most of them are familiar to us, but just to go through what we're talking about today, of course, public schools are operated publicly and funded by taxes. They're usually locally based. And sometimes through open enrollment, there is the opportunity to choose, for parents to choose on that level of which school their child might attend. Charter schools are also publicly funded. However, they operate privately. In operating privately, they're many times exempt from state and local rules and regulations in exchange for increased financial and academic accountability. So there's a trade-off here in providing funding on that level that the charter schools operate a little bit more independently. Today, there are 42 states and also Washington, D.C. that have charter schools available as an option for education, with 2.3 million students now attending 6,000 charter schools throughout the United States. Cyber schools have developed more recently, which allows students to work with their teachers through their curriculum through the internet, sometimes in combination with a traditional classroom setting. And today, about 1.8 million students are enrolled or participating in cyber schools, again, oftentimes publicly funded. Homeschooling is also an alternative which takes place outside of either a public or private school setting and takes place in the children's own homes. Sometimes parents in this case actually develop the curriculum, and others they follow and are regulated more closely by the state. And finally, there are private schools which operate privately and are funded by private money. These institutions are usually run independently of the government, sometimes, however, following the curriculum as given by the government and by the state's boards of education. They typically charge tuition and are financed by donations. So in school choice, parents have the opportunity to choose from among these, knowing what option best suits their children and their needs. As far as I took the opportunity in creating this slideshow, I put down the schools I attended. These were the schools my parents chose for me: Annunciation, St. Joseph, and Cardinal Brennan. They were the schools that my parents decided worked best for me. I guess I turned out all right since I'm standing here today. How are these schools funded? This is where I don't think there's as much debate publicly about choosing which school, but the debate really starts when we get to the topic of how do we pay for this school. Funding for alternatives to public schools, which are publicly funded, can be provided in a number of ways. So besides private funding of private schools, which again would be through donations, tuition, some things that have sprung up are educational savings accounts. You'll see any of these incorporated in different laws in different places. Educational savings accounts actually allow the state to deposit money into accounts for a parent who can then spend that money on the child's education and educationally related expenses. Vouchers. Many times when we think of school choice or hear school choice, vouchers are the first thing of which we think. Vouchers typically allocate to a family in the form of a voucher, a full or partial payment of the amount allocated for that child's education within a certain district, and then allow the parent to apply that money to the child's school which the child is attending. So it's using public funding for children's education. It's usually arranged as a direct payment from the government to the school district. The other option that has developed and which I focus on today is the tax credit, an educational tax credit or tax credit scholarship. There really are two types of education tax credits. There are personal tax credits and deductions, which are given to individual taxpayers for the educational expenditures made on behalf of their own children. And there are also donation tax credits, which are tax credits given to individual taxpayers or businesses who donate to nonprofit organizations that give private school scholarships. So tax credits would reduce the amount a taxpayer owes to the government, either individually or as a business or corporation, for each dollar that's spent on education. Tax credits, why have all of these things developed? Because there has indeed been opposition to funding school choice. Opposition to school choice comes from different segments of society, different lobbying groups. Certainly public schools many times are the ones that lobby against providing school choice and funding it because of their own fear of losing money that would be coming to them for education. Many times unions, particularly teacher unions and those involved with the work of education in public schools, oppose school choice. We find that many times opposition is also coming from politically motivated reasons, for fear of not being able to provide or control an agenda. Sometimes an agenda in a public school, again through donations or through lobbying, can be controlled obviously more easily than in some of the other options, private schools, charter schools, and certainly homeschooling. So to navigate around some of the opposition and also the significant legal challenges, vouchers and particularly tax credits have developed to provide another way for funding to reach parents, to provide for education. Pennsylvania, in its attempt to provide funding, initially attempted to institute a voucher program, and on two different occasions it came to votes and it did not pass. So because of that and some of the reasons I'll discuss of reasons why this legislation might not pass, they went another way. They found a way to navigate and to provide through tax credits programs which will allow parents in some way to have funding for private education. Under Governor Tom Ridge, who was the governor from 95 to 2001, Republican, the Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program was enacted by an overwhelming bipartisan majority. So tax credits, we'll see many times, are able to achieve what vouchers do not and lend to great bipartisan support. Pennsylvania became the first state to pass an educational tax credit that was aimed at giving some type of a tax break to corporations. The EITC program today provides $100 million in tax credits per year. When the legislation first came out, it was $60 million. We'll see that's increased. Tax credits are provided for corporate contributions to scholarship organizations, which are nonprofits that provide school scholarships, pre-kindergarten scholarships, a unique part of Pennsylvania's program, which provides scholarships at this level for pre-kindergarten. And a third prong that, again, has certainly aimed to make this appealing to as many people as possible, educational improvement organizations, which are actually nonprofits that support innovative programs in public schools, schools that sometimes we hear today are so often underfunded, particularly in the area of the arts, sciences, extracurricular activities. So contributions made to any type of an organization like this are worth up to 75% of a tax credit to the corporation, 90% if they commit to 2 annual contributions. Any business doing business in Pennsylvania and paying taxes in Pennsylvania is eligible to contribute. The scholarship organizations themselves determine the amounts given in scholarship, with the cap being the full tuition. There is an income limit per family set at $75,000 per family, and it's adjusted each year to account for inflation. These scholarships are available throughout the entire state. And in 2011 and 12, when we have the last data I was able to obtain, there were 59,000 students who, through 266 scholarship organizations, received scholarships averaging $990. To date, there have been no legal challenges filed against the program. What is interesting, as I mentioned before, Tom Ridge, the Republican governor, was a force behind the program. However, his successor, Ed Rendell, a Democrat, continued to lobby on behalf of this same program. And you'll see during his years as governor is when all of the increases in this program took place, from 2003 until he left office and signed legislation that took place in 2012. We saw the program expand from $60 million to $100 million. We also saw the business caps rise up from originally $100,000 to $300,000, and we saw the pre-K scholarship program implemented. So again, this has met with great bipartisan appeal. Governor Rendell's successor, Governor Tom Corbett, enacted legislation to increase and supplement the program with the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Program, which was enacted in 2012. I actually had the opportunity last week to meet with Governor Corbett and talk with him a little bit about the program. I actually was bold enough to invite him to come here today, but he is actually today in Rome trying to convince the Pope to come to Philadelphia, so he chose that over us. I told him I wouldn't hold that against him in any election. But nevertheless, his program that I can tell you was formed around his kitchen table certainly lives on. The Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit, so we try to go to the next slide here. The Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit is very similar as far as in the parameters of what it allows businesses to do, contribute to scholarship organizations in the same amount and for the same tax credit. The pot of this program is $50 million. But what is unique about this program is that the scholarships in this program are available to students who are in low-achieving school districts. Those school districts that are in the lower 15%. I'm trying to go to the next slide here. The lower 15%. There we are. The 15% of public schools which are considered low achieving. So in 2013-14, that was 406 schools in 71 districts that, again, are eligible to receive these scholarships. also, as I mentioned, to date, there have been no challenges to this program either. They seem to have met the challenges that have been faced in other areas and by other attempts at school choice funding. Just to look at that briefly, what Pennsylvania has faced in enacting legislation to support parents, the whole goal of education in Pennsylvania is embodied in its Constitution in Article 3, that the Pennsylvania will provide a thorough and efficient system of public education, not public schools, but public education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth. So this is something that is there to empower, to offer parents and children the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to be educated. Through the years, the legislation in Pennsylvania has expanded and interpreted this part of the Constitution, again, to provide education for children, and seen acceptable the idea of open enrollment for public school districts. Charter schools, again, have been implemented in Pennsylvania. Virtual schools are an option in Pennsylvania, and again, the two programs of school choice that I've already highlighted. Informing the law in Pennsylvania in coming to the point where tax credits have become a viable option and opportunity for parents, the legislator, parents, all those involved in advocating on behalf of school choice have had to navigate through some constitutional issues and legal concerns. Two of them, sorry, I'm having there. Pennsylvania, like many states, does have contained within its constitution both a compelled support clause and a Blaine Amendment. These two aspects of many state constitutions lead to future, or they can lead to challenges in providing funding for school choice. The compelled support clause says that no man can be compelled to attend, direct, or support any place of worship or maintain any ministry against his consent. And the Blaine Amendment, which is found in many of the state constitutions throughout the country, states that no money raised for the support of public schools of the Commonwealth shall be appropriated to or used for the support of any sectarian school. So these set parameters around which legislation has to navigate in seeking to provide funding for school choice options. Oh, technical difficulty here, sorry. The case law that has guided development of school choice in Pennsylvania, the 1979 case of Springfield School District versus Department of Education, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania acknowledges that the limitations of the state constitution do not extend beyond those announced by the Supreme Court in interpreting the First Amendment of the federal Constitution. So the Supreme Court, especially in light of the decision in Zellman versus Simmons-Harris in 2002, highlights that government aid is not, a government aid program is not readily subject to challenge under the Establishment Clause under certain conditions. If it's neutral to religion, if it provides assistance directly to a broad class of citizens who in turn, they make the choice of where to send their children, and it is their genuine and independent choice. Specifically to the issue of tax credits, the Supreme Court in 2011 in Arizona versus Christian School Tuition Organization versus Wynn ruled that tax credits are not public money and therefore can't be challenged under taxpayer standing, which is available in other First Amendment challenges. Pennsylvania's seminal case on standing is application of Beaster, where to bring a challenge, a plaintiff must allege and prove an interest in the outcome of the suit which surpasses the common interest, and the prevention of waste of tax revenue, which is usually the argument that might be raised against a tax credit challenge. Obviously, it is not sufficient to bring a challenge in this regard. Why are tax credits popular? What gives them what makes them a way to achieve providing something for our children in a way that navigates through challenges and opposition? I think there are 5 things that show us or highlight the appeal in this area. First of all, tax credits are constitutional. They are private taxpayer funds, while vouchers are government funds. Disbursement of government funds to religious schools is expressly prohibited in the state constitution of many states. The Blaine Amendment, as I highlighted Pennsylvania's own amendment, that would exclude 90% of private schools. Many times courts that are disposed against vouchers can therefore find creative ways to overturn them. Also, those who adhere to a strict reading of the letter and intent of state constitutions might also feel constrained to rule against vouchers. So legal difficulties, even the possibility of facing legal challenges, often can damper political and legislative support, as happened in Pennsylvania for voucher programs. On the contrary, courts have not overturned modern educational tax credits or deductions, but each challenge against them on both the state and federal level has been upheld. Tax credits have actually been described as a bulletproof on constitutional issues. Tax credits therefore come with little legal baggage under which vouchers currently strain. That leads to their popularity. Everyone likes a tax break. Most Americans have good experiences with receiving some type of tax credits. Tax credits let taxpayers control their own money. They can spend it directly on their child's education. They can donate it to a scholarship organization. Voucher programs send money to the government, which decides then how to spend its funds, as opposed to tax credit programs, which allow people to control their own money. Again, in the case I quoted earlier, Arizona Christian School versus Wynn, to argue against a tax credit is to make the very unpopular, if not impossible, argument that all income is actually government property, even if it has not come into the tax collector's hands. Again, tax credits avoid this whole issue. Tax credits are also popular because they do offer a third way for proponents of school choice itself. That's because of the same reason that they are legally viable. They are not government funds, and they pose less danger to the autonomy of the private schools that accept them. Vouchers themselves bring the risk of greater regulation and of control in the area of private education. So to emphasize simply a plan of vouchers many times deals school choice itself a blow, because the actual proponents of school choice, its most powerful allies, homeschoolers, social conservatives, many times do not want greater involvement or legislation of the schools. So the fact that tax credits offer a third way is also a strategy consideration that's appealing, that allows legislatures of both sides of the aisle to come together and to work for something that is achievable. Tax credits are also self-reinforcing. It's because taxpayers can spend tax credits at schools and organizations of their choosing. The tax credits will give them a stake in those schools and organizations. The scholarship organizations themselves become great support systems for choice programs. They can advocate and defend school choice programs and their expansions. They can disseminate information quickly. They can mobilize parents, and they can also be in contact with businesses and schools. Vouchers don't create this type of institution. They don't create this type of community They don't give taxpayers a say in the program or have a direct impact. And finally, it does also provide in the private sector. It empowers the private sector to become involved in the education of young people. Tax credits rely on the private sector alone. Vouchers many times might require additional government structures, or they rely on the state education system to implement. Those administrative costs themselves become arguments against tax credits, against vouchers and school choice. What is the future of school choice? What do these tax credits allow and hopefully enable us to hope for? Right now, the information that I share, there are 13 states plus the District of Columbia which do have voucher programs, and at the same time there are 16 scholarship tax credit programs in 13 of the states. Because they do provide opportunities for education, recent legislation shows that this is a growing movement. An examination of the state constitutions show the following, that 34 of the states under their constitution possibly could allow vouchers, while 48 of the states under their current constitutions allow tax credit scholarships. In recent years, we've seen this actually take place and take effect. In 2011, 7 states created or expanded tax credits, scholarships, or vouchers. Another 8 in 2012, another 12 in 2013, which included scholarship tax credit programs which were new in Alabama and South Carolina and expanded in Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Virginia. The positive results of programs in place actually breed excitement and an increased acceptance, not only in the programs at stake, but in expanding those programs. The more programs that can be put into place that allow people to experience them and to participate create a good environment and good publicity for then future goodwill in expanding the programs. One of the people, when I worked as an educator in West Philadelphia, with whom I had the opportunity to work, was State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams of Philadelphia. Senator Williams is a great advocate of school choice. He himself is from the area in West Philadelphia where I lived and worked. He saw the benefit of giving parents and students an opportunity to choose. He has advocated and worked on behalf of both the EITC and the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Program, and he has said that school choice is not an alternative to public education, but it is a part of a public education system. He advocates for school choice, saying that now the time has come for school choice and for, indeed, even vouchers. I don't know that we are at that step, at that point where we're ready to face what we would have to face to fully fund school choice, but certainly the programs that Pennsylvania has in place today are leading us in that direction. We see a growing interest in other states that are following what Pennsylvania has done. The programs in Pennsylvania since then have expanded to include a number of states. And again, the positive results increase the acceptance of school choice and of funding. As programs like this continue to become successful and to be implemented, the crack that we see forming in the wall of separation between school choice funding, I think we'll see that continue to expand and grow wider until indeed not only school choice, but funding for school choice become an option for every child and every family who would like to make that choice. Again, I thank you for your listening and your presence here today.
Well, thank you, Zach. That was very well the waterfront. What I'd like you to talk about a little bit is the political dynamic of the school choice movement, and in particular, how was this all designed to get around that opposition? I mean, give us a sense of the political landscape, because you're talking about it being popular, it growing, but we're not there yet. So can you tell us a little bit about the landscape, the oppositional landscape?
Okay. The greatest support for school choice comes from parents who want to choose and provide for their children. Unfortunately, they do meet opposition. The opposition in the political landscape many times falls traditionally among party lines as far as being a Democrat or Republican and this being that issue. What I tried to also highlight, however, is that's not necessarily the case, particularly in Pennsylvania. Many times stakeholders try to drive this conversation. The public school system itself obviously actively lobbies against types of school choice and funding options. Unions associated with public schools, again, actively lobby and invest great deals of money. But I do think that also highlights part of the groups arguing for and against. I think their motivation also has to come into play as well. Parents are lobbying for their children. We have to question sometimes, are those lobbying against a choice that does seem in many times, that seems in every circumstance to be a choice that parents should make. Those lobbying against it, I do think we have to question, and many times it comes down to some financial motivations and issues, as well as philosophies and reasons, ideologies that are being promoted.
Could you talk a little bit about that? Because and I don't expect you to address this specific instance, but in New York City, for example, Mayor de Blasio is very anti-charter school, which is a form of public school. But what is that? Where does this ideological opposition come from? What's its basis?
I think it's rooted in who is controlling the message that the children are receiving. Is it a message that who's controlling education is formation? We are forming young people in thinking, in believing, and in acting. That's as we see embodied in the Constitution of Pennsylvania. I mean, to form citizens of the Commonwealth. It's for the good of the Commonwealth in that case, but education is forming people for a purpose. And we definitely see arguments going back and forth of who has the right to control that message. Do parents and parents through the place that they're choosing have the right to control that message, or do other organizations, lobbyists, unions, who has the right to control the message being received? I think it's that struggle between the two, which sadly many times is because of money.
Okay. Emily, why don't you?
Very good job, by the way. And I hate to take it away from this portion of the conversation because I think that's fascinating. But I think it's also very interesting that Pennsylvania's program specifically has this corporate element. And it's specifically seeking to involve corporations and get them invested in education in the state. From your position, how important is it that corporations are involved, and what does that mean for the communities that those corporations are in?
Sorry, again, this was a unique part. I don't know why that went back on. I'm not the best with technical things here. The corporate involvement was a unique piece to Pennsylvania's program. It is, and it's been replicated as the one slide that I showed in about 10 to 12 other states in their programming. Corporations have an interest as part of the community. But they also have other interests too. I mean, the first being the same as a parent would have in choosing where tax money would go if they had the choice. When corporations have the choice between paying taxes or investing in something else in which they believe, here we see an opportunity for them to invest in in scholarship organizations that in which they believe, where they see a difference. Corporations see outcomes as well. I mean, it's obviously educations are providing for their future employees. They see a value there in continuing to provide for those needs and in helping the organizations in place to meet them. So corporations, as part of the community, are here investing themselves in something that they're determining is important, the education of young people.
Have corporations been at all involved in the politics of this? I mean, I keep coming back to that, but I think you talked about the kind of the various stakeholders, and so, I mean, are they part of that? Do they see themselves as stakeholders in this discussion?
From the research that I've done, I have found that they do see themselves as a stakeholder. They have something to offer, not only through their funding, but through they have something to receive as well in the education and training that's being provided by multiple educational opportunities. So they are a stakeholder through what they're giving, but they're also a stakeholder through what they're receiving.
So what's the next step in Pennsylvania? I mean, when you go back after law school, what's on the agenda?
Right. I do, the legislation that's in place, again, we've seen a history of development. The Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit is a newer program. It's only in its first year or so. So I do think these two programs are positioned to continue to develop and expand. And again, I think the opportunity of this is a funding of other opportunities in educational choice that is successful. I think the knowledge, as people become familiar that there is something there, it kind of lowers people's defenses, that they're not immediately, because again, as soon as we start talking school choice, many times some people, there's going to be two sides. It does give people a positive experience of a funding program for school choice, and I think creates a setting that will be much more open to taking next steps.
So Zach, I'm going to play devil's advocate now. How come you're trying to destroy the public schools?
I don't think, I'm not trying to destroy the public schools.
You're not? You're taking all their money away.
These programs are not taking money from, at least the programs I had, they are not taking money from the public schools. They're tax credits that they're not part of the budget.
But isn't your ultimate goal vouchers?
That might be one goal, but I'm not saying it's an ultimate goal. If there are there could be multiple, just like there are multiple options in funding, in schools, there could be multiple options in funding. If that's, I do think that there can be a more equitable way of both paying for and receiving funds for education.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions from the floor?
Are these programs means tested? Are they? Is anyone? Are these credits available to anyone, no matter what?
The EITC is available to anyone, so that that is an option. They do, I should say, they're available to anyone within certain financial. I think if a family makes $75,000 a year or less, they're eligible to receive the credit, plus an additional allotment of $15,000 per child. So if they meet that financial criteria, they're eligible for the scholarships. The Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit, though, is specifically geared not only to those under those financial circumstances, but in low-performing school districts. So right now, there are those financial caps on them.
Ask another question.
I'll be bold. Yes, go ahead.
How do you think communities would feel if there are schools that the majority don't find are improving? For example, I know in North Virginia there was a lot of controversy closer to probably September 11th about Muslim schools teaching certain things, and how do you think would that deal a blow to programs like this?
Certainly, I understand the point that you're raising, and that's, I think something, first of all, the state always has a role in regulating all schools. I mean, whatever that level is, states, private schools still have to meet certain criteria. I do think that some concerns can be addressed at that level. As far as, but also at the same token, again, we're giving parents, we're trusting parents to raise their children to have that responsibility. So I think that it doesn't have to be one size fits all. I understand that there can be some. Would we want children educated in something or as part of society that's not? I think that's what you're asking.
Some people would feel that why should my money? I know you feel like it's not public money, or that these programs are not public money, but in some ways, I think if you're making decisions to give credits, you're taking away from something else that would have been spent on. It is. I feel like it's a big pot, so you'd be taking away from something else, and so I can see people feeling certain ways about going to certain institutions that they don't support. They feel radical or whatever.
Right. No, I do understand that. And that is part of the argument and the issue debated.
Aside from the religion issue, are there any other potential federal constitutional or state constitutional problems with the
Again, Pennsylvania was able to navigate around, even in arguments for the stipulation of its own constitution, which the ones I pointed out do focus on First Amendment issues, at the federal level as well. By case law, there has interpreted the wording of the state contribution to be that reimbursements can be given, although money might not be necessary. So you're not appropriating money raised for public education, but you can be giving a reimbursement. Laws that are crafted have to be real conscious of not only the federal but the state constitution, not only and navigate through some different issues, not only on First Amendment, which we usually think of that as being the main issue because, again, 90% of private schools are religiously affiliated. But actually, I think in Florida, there was the issue of there were two situations of state constitutions, I think in Florida and maybe in Colorado, where there were, the Florida Constitution does provide for a uniform system of education, so their program fell. The proposed legislation there was, the Supreme Court ruled it was not constitutional because I think Florida's law didn't take into account Florida's own constitution, so that was a constitutional issue where their constitution called for a uniform system. And in Colorado, I think there was also a challenge where it was from their state constitution regarding local funding supporting local school districts. And so there was a question there constitutionally. So there are issues that have to be taken into consideration in each state. Okay, thank you.
A firm like this, on the risk of having big tobacco, big alcohol, big industry, essentially sponsoring cities' education? Is that a possibility?
Well, the way the legislation is in place now, there are a limited number of, again, a business can contribute up to, I think it's $750,000 is the cap, and businesses do have to apply to and be accepted as a contributor to a scholarship fund. So there's an approval process.
Do you think big tobacco would be rejected?
I did not, in my research, come across any criteria that would say yes or no to that. I'd have to, I don't know.
Zach, could I add something here? I mean, when you go to states that have started lotteries, and in Ohio, where I'm from, I mean, they sold casino gambling on, it'll go to the schools. The Virginia lottery, it'll go to the schools. I mean, so anytime they're trying to do something, they'll say it's going to go to the school. So, as far as I can tell, if Seagram's wanted to write a check I mean, even what is it, like the VH1 or whatever, the things where they're beaming educational program or advertising into the schools. That's all coming from, it's not coming from Sesame Street. It's coming from people who want to sell them stuff.
Well, I'm sure Zach will entertain other questions. Let me honor you with if I can find it here, something from the faculty here, just appreciating your efforts to bring us some fine scholarships. I think we'll all agree we heard today. On behalf of the faculty, for being one of this year's student scholars. Zach, thank you very much. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Bob. Hope you all come back next month for our last student scholars presentation by Catherine Spates on an FDA regulation issue. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.